Welcome to the Big Game Hunting Podcast, where we help hunters like you prepare for the big game hunting adventures you've always dreamed of. Now, here's your host, John McAdams.
Hello, John McAdams here. Welcome to episode 318 of the Big Game Hunting Podcast. Dan Gates from Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management is on the show with us to talk about a couple of very serious threats to hunting he and his organization are fighting against right now. As you will learn here shortly, these are issues that affect hunters from all over the USA, not just those in Colorado. So Dan and I discuss these issues in detail, what they mean for hunters in Colorado and elsewhere in North America, and how you can get involved in the fight against these anti-hunting initiatives. Now, before we do that, please do me a big favor, hit that subscribe or follow button in your podcast app. I'd also appreciate it if you would leave a rating and or a review for the show as well. Doing these things helps me reach other hunters like you who enjoy this sort of content, and you'll also start to receive my new episodes automatically every Thursday when I release them. All right, thanks for your help with that. Let's get started talking to Dan about what is going on in Colorado, how it affects hunters elsewhere in North America, and what you can do about it. Dan, it's a pleasure having you on the show today. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Appreciate the opportunity, John. Looking forward to the discussion.
All right, sounds good. So when I was in the Army, when we would do rifle marksmanship and our qualifications, sometimes you'd have more than one target pop up at a time, say a 50 and a 250-yard target. And the saying was you're always supposed to engage the 50-meter target before you engage the 250-meter target. Let's talk about the 50-meter target going on right now in Colorado, this big initiative that you guys are fighting against. Tell us about it briefly, then we can talk about things in more detail later.
Yeah, so the initiative is a hunting ban initiative. It started out as a trophy hunting ban, and they call it Initiative 91. That's the number that the Secretary of State chose to give it, but it will not be the final number if they gather the signatures. But essentially, it's an attempt to ban the harvest of mountain lions and bobcats and lynx, even though lynx are not allowed to be harvested in the lower 48 because they're federally protected. And so while they started out with a trophy hunting ban, we took trophy out of the language through our title board process and legal challenges. And so it's a hunting ban. And the definition under the measure itself, not the title, is trophy hunting is intentionally meaning to kill, wound, stalk, entrap, or pursue a mountain lion or bobcat. That's not trophy hunting, that's hunting. And so that their ultimate goal is to stop hunting in some capacity, and they've acknowledged that this is low-hanging fruit, and they would like to try to go this route, and there's a bunch of caveats to go along with that, but we are steadfast in moving forward to try to defeat them, and we've been successful so far over the last 9 months of the original part of the campaign, and now we're waiting on for them to get signatures or not, which the signatures are due by July 5th.
All right. So tell us about Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management.
Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management. I'm the executive director of that, whatever the hell that's worth. It's more like a hangman's noose or a guillotine, I think. But we started the organization back in 2016. A buddy of mine and myself, Chris Journey. Chris has since moved on to higher levels of conflict resolution on wolf issues that we're having to deal with in Colorado through a ballot initiative in 2020 where we just reintroduced the first 10 wolves on the landscape in December of 23. But CRWM, as we call it, is a 501c4, and we are an advocacy and an education organization. Any contributions that are given to a C4 are not tax deductible, so it puts us in a little bit of a different tax class of a C3, where you can get a tax deductible contribution. But C3's hands are tied on a lot of levels because they can't do some of the things the C4 can. And so our mission is to enhance, promote, and defend the North American model of wildlife conservation and responsible wildlife management. Plain and simple. We're not a membership organization. We have lobbyists representing us, 3 different lobbyists representing us full-time at the Colorado State Capitol. We're a board of 5, and we have a distinct mission to be able to enhance, promote, and defend the North American model and responsible wildlife management, which takes you into a bunch of different lanes when you're talking about wildlife commissions, legislative issues, or ballot initiatives like what we're dealing with this year.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that was a lot of stuff going on with all of that. I know the initiative 94/91, your trophy hunting ban, not your trophy hunting ban, but the proposed trophy hunting ban on mountain lions and whatnot. That is the latest stage in this fight, but this is something you guys have been battling against in Colorado for a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, it started essentially the animal activism mentality started significantly, 30 years ago, but it really gained significant traction because of the change in the demographics and legislative or gubernatorial leadership in this state. And so back in 2019, just as recently as then, we defeated a similar measure through the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission unanimously that would have taken the harvest of bobcats away. And then they came back at us again in 2020 and 21, where we defeated both of those measures. They decided to go legislatively and ran Senate Bill 131 in February of 22, and we beat them back at that level when we were told we were going to lose. And their only other option was to go back to those other two wells or to try a different avenue, which they did. In September of last year, they went through the proper procedures on trying to initiate a ballot initiative. And we fought through every single possible means that were available to us. We left no stone unturned. And this is where we're at right now. We've been fundraising. We've been educating. We've been fighting through the legal system and the courts, Colorado Supreme Court, Secretary of State, Title Board. And we are at the level now to where you get into that kind of wait and see, where each side is allowed different, components of the process and procedure. And we've done ours, and now they're doing theirs. And if they get the signatures by July 5th, we'll be full out onslaught, battle, and attack all the way up until Election Day on November 5th.
So can you explain to me a little bit of the inside baseball, how it is that this has been already proposed as a ballot initiative, but they're still getting signatures for it? What's going on with that?
It's just the way the initiative process works through the title board. I mean, I think 26 states have initiative processes where people can essentially throw anything out there. If you don't want people to have white rocks in their yard, you could essentially do a ballot initiative. You don't want to have people walk pit bulls after dark. You could do a ballot initiative. And it's a title board process where you can write it however you want, but the title board through the Secretary of State decides on the language of the title that the voters will eventually be able to decipher and vote on. And while the entire measure won't be on the ballot, the measure might be 3, 4, 26 pages or whatever that initiative is. That'll be in the blue book, the attachment of the blue book, where somebody, if they do mail-in voting or if they do poll voting, they should have access to a blue book that will give the entire language of all the ballot measures that you have. Mm-hmm. Colorado is a little bit more lenient because we only have mail-in voting. There is no poll voting here. And so when you get the thing sent to you, that's what you get to send back. And so some people like it, some people don't. But the process itself is such set up where anybody, any layman can write whatever the hell they want. And the only discrepancy that can be had is when it comes to the title board about what that language is and how the voters will, the prospective voters will be allowed to look at that, read it, decipher it, and then make a decision on it.
Mm-hmm. So you said that this is a proposed ban on hunting mountain lions, lynx, and bobcats. There is no current hunting season for lynx because they're federally protected, but you do currently have mountain lion and bobcat seasons in Colorado, correct?
We have very, very restricted mountain lion and bobcat seasons, and I say very restricted because they're highly regulated. Mm-hmm. They're abundant in numbers. They're most highly studied, some of our most highly studied wildlife that we've got within Colorado. There's a federal component on the accountability on the bobcat side because of the spots and how it falls under the conservation of endangered and threatened and endangered species, the CITES process. And the mountain lions, I mean, we got a very robust mountain lion population that is very significantly regulated. And, you got to take a test to be able to pass the test, to be able to buy the license. And then there's quotas and bag limits for each individual area. And when you harvest a lion, then you have to have that lion physically inspected and a tooth is taken out of it. And you have to give the geographical location, the sex, the age. They do their blood samples. They do all their stuff. Mountain lion and bobcat information is probably some of the most sought after, and Colorado Parks and Wildlife has done the utmost, work that they possibly could from a science-based perspective, and continue to do studies as we speak. And a matter of fact, just the other day, they opened up a public comment period for a plan for an East Slope mountain lion management plan, similar to what they did on the West Slope. That 30-day comment period opened up, and it goes to June 14th. And it's ironic that CPW is trying to do this stuff where they've been talking about it and dealing with it and investigating it and studying it for 25 or 30 years. And even all the facts and the data and the science that have been accumulated, the animal rights extremists are never happy with any of it. Mm-hmm. They say that CPW doesn't know what the hell they're talking about, but they do themselves. And I find that their lies and deceit and deceptions that they try to create only exacerbate the unknowing general public about biologies. And it's stuff that, either you believe in the science or you don't believe in the science. But when you got people working on the ground 365 days out of the year, studying stuff for 5 or 6 or 10 years, I would much rather listen to the expert, the scientist, as opposed to the activist or extremist.
Mm-hmm. So to recap, there is no hunting season currently for lynx because they're federally protected. So a banning at the state level does nothing. And at the same time, mountain lion and bobcat, both very highly regulated, and the populations of both animals are very healthy. No scientific reason that you know of or anyone has presented to stop hunting either species.
No, not at all. Matter of fact, the population of mountain lions and bobcats in the state are either stable and or growing, depending on the specific geographical area. And that's proven by multi-year studies and harvest data that's been collected. You know how you find out harvest data is you hunt. You don't trophy hunt, you hunt. And all that information is compiled, and they've got their algorithms and analytics that they compare from one year to another, from area to area, based upon ungulate populations and disease and encroachment and loss of habitat and a variety of different things. And no, there's nothing wrong with any mountain lion or bobcat population in the state of Colorado or in the western United States, for that matter.
Mm-hmm. Now, I seem to remember reading something to the effect that, so I've hunted in Colorado, but I've never hunted mountain lion there before, but that the mountain lion seasons have a quota set for the different units in those in the different parts of the state, and then once you hit the quota for unit whatever, they close the season there. Is that right?
Yep, it shuts down. The hunter is responsible to check online every morning or every day before they go into the field to see if that area has been closed or not. Sometimes, on a very rare occasion, an individual might be in the field and that area would have filled the quota. You would not have known that the quota was filled because when you left in the morning, it was still open. So occasionally, maybe on a rare occasion, there might be sometimes when the quota of 17 out of a specific area went to 19, or maybe it was 11 and went to 12. But more often than not, that quota might be 15 and they harvest 13. Mm-hmm. Or the quota might be 21 and they harvest 20. And last year, for example, there was 2,500 and some odd mountain lion hunters in the state of Colorado that all purchased licenses. And there was 486 to 500 lions that were killed, depending on what graphic you use, right in there, 14 plus or minus of 486 to 500. That's a 19% success rate. Parks and Wildlife knows what the hell they're talking about when it comes to mountain lions. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. So the season ends on a certain date, or when the quota for that area is filled, whichever comes sooner. Then
exactly.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, Colorado, I understand, or so I guess we'll back up here for a second. Colorado regulates bobcat and mountain lion to an even tighter degree than they do, for instance, deer and elk. Then, in the way that you just described that hunting season.
Yeah. The bobcat season is now December 1st to February 28th. It's a 3-month season, and people say, "Oh my God, there's a 3-month season. You got 90 days to go out and hunt a bobcat." Let me tell you, we've restricted hunting down to the point to where it used to be a 6-month season. Then it was a 5-month season. Then it was a 4-month season. Now it's a 3-month season. And the reason that we did that is because you start to have some habitat degradation, but the population of bobcats hasn't changed. I run a wildlife control business. I can tell you that places that I never ever harvested bobcats, either avocationally or from a damage standpoint or a nuisance standpoint, never had any problem with bobcats. Bobcats are moving into areas that they'd never been in before, and they still remain in abundance in the areas that they always have been in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, do I understand correctly? I seem to remember this from the Wolf Initiative in 2020, and you can feel free to talk about that if you deem it necessary. That due to the nature of things in the state, Colorado Parks and Wildlife cannot take a public stance on a ballot initiative like this. But this stuff is being pushed by, among other people, the governor's husband, who, as a private citizen, does not have those restrictions on what he can advocate for or against.
Yeah. We get asked this question often. And when you work at the pleasure of anybody, whether you work for Amazon or maybe it's a Sinclair gas station or UPS or Whole Foods or whatever, you have the option of not doing what your boss wants, but you're likely not to have a job very damn long. And so while Colorado Parks and Wildlife might take the brunt of criticism, they work at the pleasure of the governor. And if the governor gave them the authority or the position to be able to take a position or a stance or to be able to, give information about what they've done and how they've done it, then they would be able to do so. In this case, he has not. It doesn't go into the favor of what his husband or other individuals want. And it's obvious to see that the facts and the data and the science that have been collected have been somewhat squashed and thwarted in an effort to maybe suppress some of the scientific information. And that's obvious by a variety of different levels that we look at here. But the governor and this administration have not been very accommodating when it comes to distributing that science-based information of years of documentation and study. And it's disheartening to think that agendas and emotions are starting to overtake our wildlife resources as far as a management perspective, not just in this state, but in all over the West and even a lot of parts of the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the first thing that I think of when I think of that is what's going on in Washington with their spring bear and particularly their fall bear seasons being in jeopardy.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And also trying to bring grizzly bears or whatever the hell else they want to do in these locations. I mean, I was not pro-wolf. I'm not anti-wolf though either. I'm going to clarify that. I was fortunate enough to be selected to sit on the stakeholder advisory group for the wolf management plan back in 2020, 21, 22. And we were a recommendation group. We were appointed to give information about a management plan that we distributed back to the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission. I'm not anti-wolf. I think wolves are cool. Mm-hmm. I think they ought to be managed. But I don't think they should be introduced through public opinion, nor do I think that any different that public opinion should be able to turn around and talk about wild horses or prairie dogs or bumblebees or anything else. I think that should be left up to the experts. Within this particular agency, we have 350 scientists, biologists. All of the game wardens that we have are biologists. We have a lot of other staff that are scientific biologists. They're the experts. I wouldn't want the guy at Sinclair gas station doing brain surgery, and I don't want the gal who works at Whole Foods doing wildlife management and science-based management.
Mm-hmm. So I've never lived in Colorado. I've visited it many times, always enjoyed my trips there, but I did live in Washington, and the dynamic that went on in this state, and you can tell me how you think that applies to Colorado, was the people in the western part of the state, Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia, were all about certain things like wolf introduction and whatnot, grizzly bear reintroduction, whereas the people on the east side of the state that had to live with these animals and would bear the brunt of the consequences of them were less receptive to those animals. Is that the same thing in Colorado?
Yeah, I think not so much less receptive or more receptive. There's an obvious ignorance, unawareness, lack of education when it comes to certain sectors of the human population related to a variety of everything, whether it's solar energy, whether it's wind energy, maybe it's oil and gas, maybe it's water, maybe it's wildlife, maybe it's just natural resource use. People need to be educated to make informative decisions on what's best for an ecosystem that they are part of or not part of. And I think that what we've got here in Colorado is 5.9 million people live in this state right now. roughly 4.5 to 4.6 million live within 25 miles east or west of the I-25 corridor, north of Colorado Springs to Fort Collins. So you got 1.5 or 1.2 to the rest of the state. When those 4 million, and probably a couple million of those are not registered voters, but let's just say those 4 million decide the fate of the other remaining million or 1.5 million, even though some of those other 1.5 million maybe wanted something, they don't have to live with it, even though it's in their geographical area. I don't think that the way our system is the way that it was originally intended, when mass populations could determine the fate and the livelihood and the well-being, financially or otherwise, of others, that they would be able to turn around and affect by vote of how those people would live and what they would have to deal with when somebody else lived 200 miles away, wanted something, but they were never going to have to deal with it with the same effect at 200 miles to the west. They were going to have to continually deal with it. I think that those type of things are becoming more prevalent in the West. If you look at Montana, if you look at Arizona, if you look at Albuquerque, Santa Fe, New Mexico, where you have the population densities, they have a lot of the voice. And for us to be able to educate a lot of that general public to say the difference between what is right and what is wrong scientifically, not opinion-wise, not emotion-wise, it's going to become harder and harder as we move down the road 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now to be able to turn around and try to sustain our natural resources and wildlife resources as well.
Yeah, you make a very good point with the population balance in the state where most people live and how a lot of those people in one area or whatnot may think. Seems like as well that there are certain issues that get a lot of attention from people outside the state. I seem to recall hearing something that with the 2020, that was a ballot measure to reintroduce wolves to the state, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That one got a tremendous amount of support and a lot of tremendous financial support from people outside the state of Colorado. Is that true?
A lot of support from outside of the state of Colorado. A lot of what I would coin as friends of this particular gubernatorial administration. Mm-hmm. With all that said, the vote came down to, I think it was 51.9% to 49.1%, which is pretty remarkable that when you really look at it, that you got roughly 75 or 80% of the general population that lives on that I-25 corridor. Mm-hmm. But the vote came down to almost a 50-50 split. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of consternation from a lot of different entities. But sometimes in politics, money talks and bullshit walks. And money damn sure talks when it comes into out-of-state interests, similar to what we're having to deal with on this proposed Initiative 91, a significant amount, most of the money, to turn around and try to bring this to the public has come from out of state. Now, what I would say is a significant amount of our money that we've raised to oppose this measure has come from out of state as well. But I want to turn around and give the caveat to that. The reason that we've gained so much traction nationwide and even out of Canada and support monetarily to this issue is because a lot of the people that are help funding our campaign here actually have skin in the game. They're applying for preference points. They hunt here. They have land here. They strive to hunt here. They apply here regularly. They have a concern about apex predators taking over the landscape, especially through ballot box biology. So they're trying to help us match the money that was raised by several large conglomerates or individuals and do that on a grassroots effort with, $15, $20, $50, $100 increments for guys that are applying for licenses that cost $600 or $700 or $800. Mm-hmm. And so people say, well, your money's coming from out of state too. Yeah, but our guys got an interest of what is here that's not just trying to take something away. They're trying to save it for themselves and for the cause and the efforts of science-based wildlife management.
A non-resident deer or elk tag in Colorado costs a tremendous amount of money. So people that are coming from out of state to hunt there are bringing a lot of money into that state and contributing a tremendous amount of money to wildlife conservation in the state as well. And that is something that I think a lot of people just honestly don't know unless they are involved in this situation.
$3.2 billion trickle-down economic impact of what hunters and anglers bring to the state of Colorado. $3.2 billion. You show me any state where animal activism has provided any sort of economic boon to that effect. I don't care whether you're in Arkansas or New Hampshire or whatever. Animal activism only is anti-hunting. Anti-hunting is anti-wildlife. Sportsmen and women are not anti-wildlife, but they provide such a benefit to the resource that everybody benefits off of, whether they're an anti or whether they're a non-hunter or whether they're a hunter and angler or sportsman. We provide the funding mechanism federally and statewide to sustain wildlife populations so everybody gets a chance to know that they're there and enjoy them to their particular liking. People talk about the public trust doctrine all the time, and I'm thinking, well, I'm part of the damn public. You're part of the public. But we help fund that public trust doctrine that there's no other funding mechanism for. And so I think the selfishness of the antis, all they want to do is stop it. And they don't care what state, they don't care what species, they don't care what method of take, they don't care what manner is employed after they stop it, whether there's management, human conflict resolution, habitat degradation and conflict. They don't care what the end result is except for to stop us. And at that point, then there's no funding mechanism for all the other species as well.
So let's rewind again back to 2020. What sort of grassroots organized groups were there fighting against this wolf introduction?
Well, there were several at the time. There was a couple different coalitions. One was Stop the Wolf, and the other one was Coloradans Protecting Wildlife, and that was a combination of efforts of the Colorado Cattlemen's Association, Colorado Wool Growers Association, Safari Club International, the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, and a bunch of other entities. Two separate parallel campaigns hoping to achieve the same outcome. Both of those put up as formidable as a fight as what they could at the time. But part of the conversation that we had is if you look at those organizations like Safari Club and RMEF, they're 501c3s. So they were limited in scope of what they could actually do, even though they could engage to some degree. They couldn't do it probably as formidably as what they would have liked because their tax status wouldn't allow them to do so. One of the reasons that the anti-organizations are so effective at what they do, they have so much money that comes in from so many different entities that they're all 501c3s. But because of the amount of footprint that they have on the landscape, it gives them a little bit more leeway about how much money comes in and how much money they can actually expend to go out in a C3 category. We have less organizations with less funding, and most of our organizations have concentrated historically over the course of the last 40 or 50 years on habitat conservation, not the fight. Habitat conservation, you don't necessarily need to be a C4. But for the fight, you need to be. And our organizations that we're all members of, all the acronym groups that we talk about often, didn't, in my mind, prepare appropriately enough for the fight. They knew it was inevitable, but they didn't know how formidable the opposition was going to be. And I think it put us in a little bit of a quandary. And that's why with CRWM, not saying we're bigger, better, meaner, faster, stronger, but we are a little bit more nimble and can be a little bit more adaptive. And I think that's the roadmap to success and to the future of wildlife management myself.
Well, tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing. So you guys didn't exist in 2020. It's 4 years later now.
We did. We did it. We were formulated in 2016.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right. The situation is different now. It's 4 years later, past the wolf introduction. You guys have learned a lot of stuff from that. What are you guys doing right now fighting against this?
The biggest thing we're doing is doing it differently in the sense to where, because we're a C4, we have a little bit, there's a little bit more gray area or leeway that we could actually apply to this particular effort. One other thing is, because of what I mentioned, as this dropped in September of 23, we were immediately poised to be able to push the button and write the check of what we needed to in a very short period of time. We had actually hired the campaign managers and we hired the attorneys within a week of this dropping and becoming an initiative. We had the ability to be able to immediately mobilize, start to build an armament, start to build a messaging campaign, while at the same time being able to fight through the Secretary of State, the Title Board, and eventually the Supreme Court. No other organization, if they could have done that, they didn't step up. But we believe that no other organization had the wherewithal, the resources, or the voting capability to immediately act when necessary. Because of the timeline that was imposed on us when this was first initially filed on September 22nd of last year, I believe the first legislative council hearing was on October 6th. Then the first title board hearing was scheduled for October 18th. There's not an organization on the planet outside of a C4 that was capable of doing something from the 22nd of September over several weekends to the 6th of October, especially monetarily, signing contracts, going through boards, and the fact that they're C3s, they had to work through the logistics of the legal side of things as well. It doesn't put us on a pedestal any higher. It just makes it to where we were a little bit more prepared. What we're doing now is, after all those victories that we've accumulated over the course of the last 7 months through the title board, Supreme Court, and Secretary of State, it positioned us in a corner of education to our rank and file, to the hunter and angler, sportsmen and women community around the country, and say, hey, the devil's at the doorstep. Not only do we need your help, we need your unequivocal support, and we need you to be educated about the terminology of what they're trying to do. Convincing the general public, the hunters and anglers around this country, from organizations and entities and individuals alike, all through different states, that this was not a mountain lion and a bobcat deal. And by reading the language and letting them see it for themselves, when you talk about banning the use of hounds, the way it's written, if this is a statutory definition of trophy hunting and hounds can be incorporated into that, it started to raise the hackles of the upland bird associations and the waterfowl guys. Everybody uses dogs. Maybe it's just a coon hunter. I don't have bobcats. I don't have mountain lions, but I use my dogs for hogs or for coons. The statutory definition of this was easily translated to the layman, the guy that said, I'm never going to hunt a mountain lion. I don't have any mountain lions in New Hampshire. Once they read the language and they understood the difference between regulatory, like with a game commission, or statutory, which now becomes state law as opposed to state regulation, it can be easily transferred and set a precedent to any game species for any method of take, any state in the country, because this would be the first state in the country to define trophy hunting in the measure. And as I mentioned, in the measure, it specifically says trophy hunting means intentionally killing, wounding, stalking, pursuing, and entrapping a mountain lion, bobcat, or lynx, even though we're throwing the lynx to the side. Once you set those parameters, you can get people to understand how significant it is. And so the advertising, education campaign that we've done so far is just to turn around and educate people on the bad component of ballot box biology, making sure that we stand by science, that the data and the facts are irrefutable, and that we make sure that we march forward on the North American model of wildlife conservation. And there's not an organization, a species organization in the United States, that does not adhere to the North American model standards. It's just that now our allies are fully aware of what the enemy is trying to do, and the adversary's goal is to stop it. They want to stop the North American model. They want to stop science-based management. They want to stop all of us from being in the field. Matter of fact, I think they want to stop us from being on the field, let alone in the field with a gun and a license. But there's a component there of education that we've done over the last 7 or 8 months that we'll continue to build on to make sure that we have that circular movement of education to where everybody from Washington to everybody to New Hampshire and everybody from Florida back to Arizona and up to Maine all know that this is not anything other than the first attempt to define trophy hunting as hunting and then start working through the forest.
Okay. So you painted a pretty stark picture there of why a guy that lives in Texas or Louisiana should care about this thing that's going on in Colorado then.
Yeah. Significantly. When you start talking and looking at what's a trophy to you, John? I know what it is to me. It's the time in the field and the luck of the draw to be able to harvest whatever my prey is, whatever my quarry is, whatever my endeavors are. My son harvested a 2-point buck and my wife harvested a doe deer. She did it, 30 some odd years ago. It's hanging on our wall. It was a trophy to her. She's only killed 2 deer since then. She killed a couple antelope. But to her, that was a big deal. She went through the hunter education classes. She learned how to shoot for the first time. She learned about laws, wildlife rules and regulations. She learned about habitat. She learned about migratory species and predator-prey operations. She learned all that on her own because she wanted to turn around and be with me in the field. First thing she shot was a doe. I know kids that have gotten a beagle dog, and the first rabbit that they got the rabbit mounted because that was the first thing that dog had got. Well, that's a trophy to that kid, according to this new statutory regulation. That rabbit or that doe deer could be interpreted, maybe through the court of law, but could be interpreted because you intentionally killed or wounded, stalked, pursued, or entrapped that rabbit or that doe deer. Those are things that the average sportsman has not had to deal with over the course of the last 10 or 20 years. And the antis are thinking outside of the box to see what they can get that sticks, that they can feed off of and continually build their momentum and efforts moving forward.
All very interesting stuff and also kind of scary when you think about it, too.
Scary as hell, isn't that?
When I think about it, just look at something like this on the face of it. You think they're going after mountain lion, bobcat, and lynx because it is low-hanging fruit, so to speak? There's not as many people that hunt them. It's something that's easier to convince your typical, say, just non-hunter, not even an anti-hunter, someone that just doesn't hunt. Yeah, why would anyone want to hunt a bobcat or a mountain lion? No one eats those, any of that stuff. You know, these people are just quote-unquote trophy hunters. They're doing it because they like killing.
Yeah, I think that the lies and the misnomers that our adversaries have thrown out there are starting to wane and not gain as much support. When you look at mountain lions, for instance, the state of Colorado, it's classified as a big game animal. And any big game animal, you have to harvest that animal and then prepare all of the meat, the edible portions of meat for human consumption. Mountain lion, for anybody that hasn't tried it, is a very, very tasty fare. It's very highly coveted. If you look at the recipes online, and we did this through the title board process when we were arguing about the edible component of mountain lion meat. If you look at recipes online, you can find hundreds of recipes for mountain lion and even bobcat. Raccoons, for instance. People eat raccoons all over the place. I know there's a place, I think it's in Gillette, or maybe it's Gillette down south. They have a raccoon harvest and then a raccoon town feed, for crying out loud. They have 300 or 400 people come eat raccoon. Do I want to eat a raccoon? No. Am I going to stop anybody else from eating a raccoon? No. But I know people that eat harvested beaver meat, harvested raccoon meat, harvested muskrat meat, nutria. Everything on this planet can be edible to somebody. But when somebody doesn't utilize it in the form or fashion that an anti-extremist group thinks that they should, by God, that's a waste. It's a wanton waste. It's just destruction of wildlife. We have laws and rules and regulations nationwide pertaining to game laws. And while fur bearers, like bobcats, have a different classification because they are fur bearers, and they still, under the North American model of wildlife conservation, are classified as a harvestable component or a segment of the wildlife population because there is a purpose and they are harvested for a legitimate reason. That's what the model says. The antis want to turn around and throw out this deal about profiting. The profiting came from selling game meat in the early 1900s, late 1800s, where they were talking about selling big game meat. They never mentioned fur bearers. The antis want to throw in fur bearers, but we talk about small game, we talk about fur bearers, we talk about big game, we talk about ungulates, we talk about predators. It's all of the same concept of science-based wildlife management. And I think that we're getting to a point where the general public's starting to see the fallacies and the misnomers of the antis as somewhat extreme, misguiding, and deceitful as a whole.
How can my audience help you in your efforts?
Well, two parts. Immediately, if they were so inclined, if they went to SaveTheHuntColorado.com, they can get not only informed by the information that we have on the website, by the ballot initiative language. They can also see other initiatives that were proposed that we beat back, which would give people an idea of just how much lunacy are in these conversations of some of these groups. Read the language in Initiative 101 and see what we destroyed and what we cut down. You can also donate. You can shop Everybody's got a shopping cart now, which I didn't come up with, but hey, it's a means to be able to support your cause, no matter what that is. And all the funds go toward this fight. Up until June 13th, Safari Club International is running a raffle for us, and all the funds go to this effort to defeat this measure and save the hunt. It's a mountain lion mount and a mountain lion hunt here in Colorado for this year. And there's another raffle for a Gunworks rifle and a scope. The Gunworks rifle is donated by Gunworks and Salida Gun Shop. And the mountain lion hunt and mountain lion mount is the Whitaker Brothers Outfitting and Ovis Wildlife Taxidermy. Those are two things that if somebody just doesn't want to donate, put some money where your mouth is and buy a raffle ticket, just like a box of shells. Help support our efforts, what we're doing here. But more importantly, if they've done that, they don't want to do any more, or if they want to do some more and continue to help fund the cause and help us defeat these efforts, educate themselves on what's going on in their state. And I say this, and sometimes I don't probably say it enough. The biggest problem that we have is that we take it for granted as a community that what we have is going to always be here. And if we don't fight for it, at least as much as we partake in it, don't think that it's going to last forever. If we don't know who our legislators are, if we don't know who our game commissions are, if we don't know who our biologists and our scientists and our game wardens are, if we don't know the process and procedure of ballot initiatives or citizens' petitions or pieces of legislation, those are things that we can control ourselves. And somebody might look at me and go, well, Gates, I don't have enough time to do that. If every single sportsman, 14 million sportsmen and women in the United States, would kick in 8 hours per year to the fight, not to a banquet, not to a fundraiser, not to a collaring session or a fish shocking session or what, to the fight. Go to a meeting, write a letter, get on a Zoom, go to a Capitol legislative hearing, let those people know who you are and what you do and why you think it's important for them to make the right decisions on you and your interest behalf. If you don't do that, what business do we have thinking that we're sportsmen and women and taking it for granted? Because somebody's out there trying to take it away from us and spending a hell of a lot more than 8 hours a year to do it. But if we collectively spent 8 hours a year apiece, we could be the most undeniable, forceful, conservation-minded individuals on the planet, let alone turn around and actually probably get what was needed, not just what we wanted.
Can you share with the audience some of the things that you're planning on doing between now and the election in order to fight against this?
Well, we started a issues committee, which is mandated by state law if you're going to fight a ballot initiative or start a ballot initiative. So the issues committee is Colorado Wildlife Deserve Better. And that issues committee has specific sideboards and requirements that it has to adhere to as far as reporting and auditing and accountability. It has to be able to acknowledge its donors and contributors. And it's a tracking process through the ballot initiative process to make sure that everybody supposedly is playing on fair turf. We've done that. We've started a decline to sign campaign as the adversaries are getting signatures. We've got social media and spots that are out there attempting to educate some of the target audience, the general public, about why you shouldn't sign the petition to get the signatures. If our adversaries are so well informed and so well funded to get the signatures, immediately once they do, then we start our general advertising, education, information campaign, which will primarily be that target audience that we talked about earlier, that I-25 corridor audience, mostly in the Denver metro area, about 9 counties of the Denver metro area that are going to make up the bulk of the decision of one way or the other. Because we know there's going to be people just like you and I that are going to say, no way to any of this stuff. I'm voting, the way I believe. And there's going to be a few people on the other side. They say, no way to any of this stuff. I'm voting the way I believe. But there's about 75 or 80% in the middle that they want to vote and do what's right. They might have an opinion, but they don't have the facts. If we can give them the facts, and if we can turn around and show what Colorado Parks and Wildlife has done historically, specifically with mountain lions, for instance, since 1965, when they were designated a big game animal from a nuisance animal, We had less than 200 on the landscape in 1965, and we've got between 4,000 and 5,000 on the landscape now with regulated hunting. Once you advertise and you educate and inform that target audience through a variety of different means, some of that's billboards, some of that's print, some of that's social media, some of it's just digital type stuff, some of it's network television, radio. I doubt we're going to be going out and putting yard signs up, but we might have some other tricks up our sleeve. But once you do that in a comprehensive campaign, this is a campaign. Look at how much time and effort goes into a presidential election or a gubernatorial election or other ballot initiatives that people talk about, whether it's oil and gas or water or taxes or healthcare or abortion or whatever. This is what that is. And it takes that sort of planning, strategy, and strategic armament to be able to build up to that level to you can afford to do all of those aspects, use all of those mechanisms to come out victorious, hopefully November 5th.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about those other two initiatives that you mentioned earlier before we started recording.
Boy, those are the scary ones because the state can't vote on those. Those are two city and county of Denver initiatives. And I'll go over them briefly. One is a slaughterhouse ban, and there's one slaughterhouse in Denver that's been there since the early 1900s. And it's the largest slaughterhouse for lambs and sheep in the western United States. They want to shut that down, and they want to prohibit any other slaughterhouses from being in the city and county of Denver. Now, I'll throw out real quickly that this is real close to the Denver National Western Stock Show. What do they do at the stock show? They show lambs and sheep and hogs and beef and horses and everything else. This slaughterhouse processes a lot of that, but it also processes a lot of the Native American sheep from the Southwest, processes a lot of the sheep from Montana and Wyoming and Colorado, is a very intricate economic engine, but it also is based in close proximity to the Denver National Western Stock Show. The reason I mention the stock show is because the next initiative, also only for the city and county of Denver, is a fur ban. It's a total fur ban. That means cowboy hats. That means fishing lures. That means fishing flies. That means Native American crafts. They want to ban the sale of it all, whether it's a beaver hat or a beaver felt hat like Stetson or Resistol or Kimosabi would make. They want to make sure that you can't use fur on fishing flies and lures, which typically, from my understanding, accounts for about 75 to 80% of all fishing lures made on the planet. So if you had squirrel tails on a MEPS lure, or if you had beaver or mink on a fishing fly, that would be banned. You wouldn't be able to turn around and sell it, display it, barter it, trade it, do anything in the city and county of Denver. The reason I mention both of those is because the city and county of Denver people can vote on those two issues, but they can also vote on the statewide issue, the mountain lion and bobcat. I, living in outside of Denver, can't vote on the fur ban or the slaughterhouse deal, but they are tightly connected. And what we see is a crossover of extremism because you're getting into somebody's food source, somebody's fiber source, and somebody's avocation and wildlife management source. And we see a strong connectivity in the three of those. We think it's extreme overreach. We think it's an extreme minority of the general population, but they're trying to impose their wishes, wants, and desires and their beliefs on an entire population. And we believe because of this friendly gubernatorial administration that has been here since 2018, that has helped fuel the fire, not just by their appointments, but also by their ideologies and methodologies of what they bring to the table. So if we beat all three this year, we're going to be a force to be reckoned with. If we don't, we're going to turn around and have to be a scapegoat for somebody. But I think the way things are going at this point in time, the general public is fed up in Colorado and in a lot of other parts of the country. And we're hoping to set the tone and narrative after November 5th as to the way we do our work in Colorado when it comes to humane treatment of wildlife and animals, when it comes to the economic boom that wildlife and natural resources provide to the economy and to individuals and to the landscape that they live on and to the agencies that manage all that wildlife as well.
Mm-hmm. I remember thinking back in 2020, leading up to the election, I was very nervous about the status of that ballot initiative with the wolves. And I strongly suspected that was going to pass. And I was pleasantly surprised to see, I wasn't pleasantly surprised to see that it did pass, but I was a little surprised to see that it was closer than it turned out to be. It seems like it is a whole different ball game this time around, though. And if I were a betting man right now, I think you guys are going to beat all three of those. But we got to keep our foot on the gas and continue to work and fight against it. So to recap, for people that live in the state of Colorado, one, they need to vote against this. And if you're in Denver, you need to vote against the other two ballot initiatives. If you live in Colorado or elsewhere, check out your website, get the news updates, make a donation. If you do that before June 9th, you can enter in those raffles to win the gun or the hunt, right?
June 13th on that at Save the Hunt, Colorado. The drawing will be June 15th.
Okay.
And of course, we'll take donations from now until November 5th on everything. Mm-hmm. But the raffles that SCI is running for us is up through June 13th. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. June 13th. Okay. Very good. And then, yeah, continue to keep the pressure on. All right. That all sounds excellent. Any closing thoughts before we wrap up today, Dan?
I think one thing that I would say is, I kind of reiterated this a little bit, but it's imperative that we as sportsmen and women take it upon ourselves to continue with the science-based direction that was given to us through stewarded, mechanisms and conduits of our predecessors, of our forefathers of wildlife management from the late 1890s into the early 1900s. They did what they did so we can have what we have. If we want to continue to have what we have, whether it's during my time, your son's time, your neighbor's son's time, if we want to continue to do that, it has to be something that we're willing to prop up a flag and fight for. And if we don't, not only are we doing a disservice to our forefathers, we're doing a disservice to our successors as well. And I want to be able to turn around and look down from the stars above, wherever the hell that might take me down the road, and look down and say, we did this for what was right. And I think that we have a chance to do that here. And I think that other states and other individuals can see the accomplishments that we're making, not just for ourselves, not for just Colorado, but for this nation as a whole and our wildlife management and natural resources. And I would like to see everybody join arms to make sure that we continue to do that so we don't have to turn around and do this sort of crap every election year.
I'll bet you don't get to do a lot of hunting in election years, do you?
No, sir. Not lately, anyway. Not at all.
All right. Well, sounds good. Very well said, Dan. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Aim small, miss small.
Like Dan and I talked about, that ballot initiative in 2020 to introduce wolves to Colorado barely passed, even with a massive spending imbalance. Now, here we are in 2024, and we fortunately have a much higher, much better organized level of resistance to ballot initiatives like these from the hunting community. We can definitely win this fight at the ballot box, and truth be told, I expect we will. The trick is that we need to start doing the legwork now to fight against them. Do not get complacent. So here is what you can do to help. Go to SaveTheHuntColorado.com, make a donation. If you do that before 13 June 2024, you can enter in a raffle through the SCI Colorado chapter to win a Gunworks Nexus rifle and a mountain lion hunt donated by Whitaker Brothers Hunting Company and a full body mount of that mountain lion donated by Ovis Wildlife Taxidermy. There are 2 buttons you can click on the SaveTheHuntColorado.com homepage that will take you to the SCI page where you can enter both of those raffles. All proceeds from those raffles will go to Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management. Now, you should make a donation because you think it's the right thing to do, not because you think you'll win a mountain lion hunt or a rifle. But those are both outstanding potential bonuses you could get in addition to helping fight the good fight here, so to speak. Now, if you are listening to this after 13 June 2024, you can still go to SaveTheHuntColorado.com and make a donation. And I still encourage you to do so. Donations are not tax deductible as charitable donations, but you are still doing work for a good cause here. I've put my money where my mouth is with support for Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management. I strongly encourage you to do so as well. Now, furthermore, if you live in Colorado, I strongly encourage you to vote against this ban on mountain lion, bobcat, and lynx hunting. Furthermore, if you live in the Denver area of Colorado, I also strongly encourage you to vote against those additional ballot initiatives Dan and I discussed regarding the ban on slaughterhouses and the ban on selling of fur products. Now, finally, give Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management a follow on social media too. I put links to the website and their social media profiles in the show notes. Next week, I am bringing another guest on the show to talk about some other things you can do to fight against some anti-hunting initiatives, including, but not limited to, those issues Dan and I discussed today. That will do it for this episode. As we wrap up, please make sure you are signed up for my email list if you haven't already done so. To do that, click the other link in the show notes or go to huntingguns101.com. Sign up there. You'll get my free ebook on the best hunting calibers. Not only will you get my ebook when you do that, but you'll also start to receive the emails I send out every weekday. If you like the podcasts, you will love those emails. So make sure you are getting them too by going to huntingguns101.com and signing up there. Remember, you can make your dream hunt turn into a reality, and we can help. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next time on the Big Game Hunting Podcast.
This show may be over, but we have plenty more for you on our website. For more information on today's topic, as well as lots of other useful hunting resources, head over to the BigGameHuntingBlog.com. We look forward to having you back for the next episode. But until then, happy hunting.